So many things from what we've heard about what John introduced us to this morning finds its way into the next part of our conversation. So my aim is to build and deepen the conversation we already started this morning with John. So there I am. I'm sitting in a coaching conversation with a group of people. I run leadership development programs, and as part of this program, we have ongoing monthly coaching sessions in small groups. So I'm sitting there with Jess, and it's Jess's turn on the hot seat. And so she gets to the front of the room, i.e. she unmutes herself on Teams, and she talks about her challenge for the month. And she says, I have an issue at the moment. I've got a really tricky conversation that I need to have, and I just don't know how to approach it. You see, I work with this colleague, and the pair of us go out and we have meetings with our customers. And we go everywhere together, and we meet all our clients together. But the problem I'm facing is that I just don't get enough airtime. Whenever I speak, he speaks over me. He's always answering the questions before I can. And so basically, I'm just not getting any visibility in those conversations. And I'm really worried about that impact. And I just don't know how to say this to him. You know, I don't know how to say, could you shut up, please? How do I say that nicely and still maintain our relationship? So we did a little bit of coaching with her, and she plucked up the courage to have this conversation. So she gets to work and she takes her colleague out for coffee. And she sits down and she gives them a little bit of context, and then she gets to the guts of it. So really what I'd love for us to talk about ways that we can share the conversation when we're in the meetings with clients. And he goes, what? Slams his hand down on the table. What are you talking about? This is ridiculous. I don't talk more than you do. You talk all the time. You're always talking. I don't understand what's happening to me. This is ridiculous. Stands up, storms out. Oh yeah, can you feel it? And I think that this is the kind of stuff that our brain tells us is going to happen every time we approach a difficult conversation in the workplace. But it gets worse. Not only does he stand up and storm out, but for the next couple of days, he gives her the silent treatment. Yeah, and this is what it looks like. He sits opposite her in their petition in the workplace. So he gets to work in the morning and goes, morning, morning, morning. Like it's that level, like it's teenage level, you know what I'm talking about? So he gives her the silent treatment for a couple of days. She calls me on the second day. She says, Anneli, I can't handle it anymore. I just can't bear it. It's my worst nightmare. I didn't want this to happen. I'm just going to have another conversation with him. I'm going to apologise. I'm going to apologise for raising the topic. And this is what happens in our brain. We think the very worst is going to happen. And sometimes it does, but typically it doesn't. But it's the stuff that we hold in our minds before we have the conversation. So John started the conversation today by saying, who loves the critical conversation? And a few hands went up at the end, which I was very, very surprised by. Well done, you. But most of you were sitting anywhere from what? A 2 to a 4 to a 5? Yeah? And this puts you smack bang in the dab of being human. Well done, you. Yes. Do you know anybody who gets up and says, oh my God, today is the day. I am so excited. Guess what's going to happen? Guess what's going to happen. You're never going to guess. So I get the opportunity to talk to Sarah. Yeah, she's underperforming. Oh my God, it's going to be great. I can't wait for the conversation. It's going to be fantastic. And there's more. She's got bad breath. And I'm the one who gets to tell her. Woo woo! I'm so excited. And so I get to look at her. I get to see the shame and the blame and the fear and the tears. If I'm really lucky, she might cry. Yes. Okay, that's ridiculous, right? Nobody is thinking like that when it comes to these difficult conversations. And if that's you, I cannot help you. You're in the wrong room right now. But when it comes to these conversations, we each have our own style. We each have our own way of approaching them, right? So some of us are much more down the avoidant end of the spectrum. We'll do anything not to have this conversation. I read an article recently that was talking about some new research that gave us a little bit of an insight into this new specimen of female frog. And what they found with these female frogs, stay with me, it does link. What they found with these female frogs is that when approached by the male specimen to perpetuate the ongoing survival of the species, you following me? Rather than have a conversation, as it were, the female frog fakes her own death. Yeah. Can you imagine that playing out in the workplace? So your boss comes to you Friday night, massive pile of files. Hey, you don't mind, do you? You could just get through these files. I know you've got somewhere to go, but it won't take you long. It's okay, isn't it? Well, I mean, I don't really think it's going to work. Or maybe you're not so avoidant. You're okay with dropping some hints. Maybe it's a little bit passive-aggressive. Maybe it's not as direct, but you still want to get the message across. So you purchase yourself one of these. Maybe that'll work. Or maybe being more direct is your style and you just want to tell them like it is. Yep. Hello, bye-bye, I resign, Anneli out. Boom. Now, there are always some people in the crowd who say, actually, I don't mind having these critical conversations. And we saw some today. And for those people, I always want to warn, make sure when you're having these conversations that you're doing it respectfully. Because it turns out that most of the time when people say to me, Anneli, I don't mind, I'm happy to just tell people like it is. Like, I will go to that person and say, oi, you know, whiffy, bad breath, no good. Have a mint, pop a mint in your gum. Like, I'm happy to say that. And that's great as long as you deliver it with respect. Would you agree? So there is a way of being direct. Clear is kind, but it also must be respectful. So whatever style you have, because we're typically not that great at having these conversations, this is my biggest tip. My friends, this is my hot tip for the topic of difficult conversations. I think every workplace should have one of these. Just in case. Now, I've been running my business for almost 20 years and I've been working with leaders and teams and organisations helping people get heard. Wherever I go, no matter what industry I'm talking to or what leader I'm working with, whatever level they are in the organisation, if you are human, you are struggling at some level with this conversation. Would that be a fair statement? There's always something, and it doesn't matter how many times you've done it. If it's an important conversation to you and it's something you're not really comfortable doing, it falls into the realm of a difficult conversation, yeah? And I would suggest that the more important they are, the more difficult that they can be. So today we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to talk about why we avoid these conversations and why we shouldn't. We're going to look at top tips for how to have them. I want to throw the reins over to you for a little bit. You've all been on the receiving end of one of these conversations, and I'm sure you've also been on the giving end of these conversations. So you have wisdom. There is experience and wisdom in the room. I want to make sure we get an opportunity to share that with each other as well as we go through the conversation today. So I want to start with a little bit of a quiz. What would you do if you had to give difficult feedback to... Now, this is going to be one of 3 scenarios. Let's go through the scenarios, and I want you just to notice how you might shift and change your answer according to the context, okay? So, scenario 1, what would you do if you had to give difficult feedback to a team member? This is someone who is in your team, so you are the boss in this scenario, and you're giving feedback downwards. The behaviour's not quite right. It needs to be addressed. Do you... speak up straight away? Do you delay just a little bit? Or do you ignore it altogether? You don't have to answer out loud, don't worry. I'm not taking notes. Just get the answer for yourself. All right, next scenario. You now have to give difficult feedback to a buddy. So now we're going sideways. We were down, now we're going sideways. Same question. Do you speak up? Do you delay? Do you ignore? All right, and our final context is now you're giving it right to the very top, so you're going up to the boss. Do you speak up? Do you delay? Or do you ignore? Hands up if your answers shifted as the context shifted. Yes, okay, brilliant. So this is just another way to demonstrate that there is no black and white. There is no script that you can follow every time, all the time. Just like we talked about in John's conversation. Sometimes there's a need for a critic, sometimes there's a need for a cheerleader, and sometimes there's a need for the coach, right? We want to make sure we're really tapping into who's in front of us and what do they need. And so we know as humans that there are times when we might delay for a little bit. Would you agree that there is some circumstance where it's okay just to give it a beat and just check? Is this a once-off? Is this a pattern? Do I just give it a heartbeat here? Do I ignore altogether? How important is this for me? How important is this for them? We need to be making these decisions as we go. But at the end of the day, what happens most often is that there is some level of avoidance playing out. The more important it is, the higher the consequences you believe there are, the more we're likely to indulge in this behaviour. Yep. So we know that there was some research done and reported in a report by Bravely recently where they shared that 70% of us are avoiding these difficult conversations. So if it is you, you are not alone. Welcome to the human race. You are in very good company. And how about this one? So you've all heard of Are You OK? You know, Are You OK Day, yeah? Brilliant organisation. So they run a workplace relationship survey. In 2012, their results showed that a certain percentage of us would rather look for another job than lean into a workplace conflict. What percentage of people do you think would do? Just hold the number in your mind. What percentage of us would rather look for another job than face a difficult workplace scenario? I know, right? That's almost half. That's almost half of you. Isn't that crazy? So I'm curious, why don't we have them? We've all had them. We've all been on the receiving end of them. We've probably all had to deliver them. Why are we avoiding them? This is our first table talk conversation. So please, my friends, discuss, why do we avoid difficult conversations? Go. Yes, that's right. It is calming. Thank you very much. I use those bells at the in my full-day trainings, and I did the training once, and I was using the bells, and a woman right at the front of the class, every time I did it, she would go, "Namaste." So it is very calming. It's a lovely feeling. So we are talking about why we don't have them. And I'm now going to run around the room and use this mic, my lovely friend at the back of the room. If you could turn this one on, that would be amazing. I'm just going to... Yeah, there we go. Brilliant, thank you. So I don't have a random table generator, so I have this. That's right. When I come to your table and I shove it in your gob, well, not all the way in, but close, then you are going to share with us what came out of your table conversations, yeah? Yes. Oh, look at her face. She's not even looking at me. She won't even make eye contact with me. Are you going to fake your own death right now? Is that what's going to happen? So why don't we have these conversations, my friend?
On our table, we discussed that it might not be worthwhile. We might be too stressed. Mapping out territory takes time. Will this even lead to any form of change, or will it just be unpleasant?
Yes, okay, that's beautiful, thank you. I feel like you could go on, that's brilliant. Excellent. In fact, I read a statistic recently, it was something like 65% of us don't have the conversation because we think it won't make a difference, right? To your point. We think it won't make a difference. So how are we ever going to make a difference if everyone is thinking, well, I'm not going to say something? How are we ever going to change? All right, a random computer generator. You. Thank you.
My name's Angie. I'm from Spark Foundry. We spoke about, people avoid it because does it matter at the end of the day? Like, it doesn't concern me. And we also spoke about, sometimes when you speak to someone, when you provide them with feedback, and then they go off and then speak internally with their friends or colleagues about it. You want to avoid that team gossip. And then that created like, like a negative reflection on yourself. Yeah. Anything else that we spoke? Yeah.
We're just deciding what we're going to share with the group over here.
Having
Yes,
important
consensus?
discussions. No, I think we also said that sometimes these difficult or important conversations, you knew that if you had them, they may change the relationship you have with that person, and probably from experience that you know that may not always be the best. So I think that's, why we don't have that.
Yes. So we are weighing up what is going to be the negative consequence of me leaning into this conversation, right? And as much as our brain tells us it's going to go bad all the time, it doesn't always go bad. But it can, and that's the problem. It can. And we can no longer get away with this idea of, well, maybe I won't have the conversation because it doesn't really affect me anymore. We just heard John say there's laws about the bystander effect. So doesn't it affect you? Isn't it a psychosocial hazard if you let the workplace be rife with gossip and backstabbing and disrespectful behaviour? Isn't that part of a negative, toxic culture that we can no longer be bystanders of? And yes, everyone's not looking at me anymore at all. This happens when you're a facilitator in your room. You say, okay, let's discuss. Everyone goes, eyes down, eyes down. Don't look at me, don't look at me. Who am I going? I'm going to look at you. What did you talk about on your table?
Okay, so we talked about why do we avoid? So it might create more trouble. I'm delivering a message I don't actually agree with, so why do I want to deliver someone else's message? I don't feel like it. I'm tired, and I don't want to do it today.
Yeah.
So I'm prepared. You can dismiss a lot of things. Maybe it's a one-off. Maybe they're just having a bad day. Maybe they haven't had coffee yet. And sometimes your business structure and the politics within it makes it fall into the too hard bucket, and you'll be on an island and you won't feel like you're supported if you deliver a message that's unpopular.
Right. Okay, nice, thank you. So as you can see, we have all manner of ways to avoid. Yes, we are very creative as humans. Well done, you. Here are some of the common ways that we avoid. This is what I hear most often in my coaching conversations with leaders. Number one, we hope it will resolve on its own. Yeah, who had some version of that on their table? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I call this the lumpy carpet syndrome. So you just are like, oh, that'll be right. She'll be right. She'll be right. You cannot walk on a lumpy carpet, my friend. It will trip you up in the long run, yes? Yes. So we hope it will resolve on its own, but it typically doesn't resolve on its own if it's big enough and important enough and the consequences are palpable. So we need to get clear on when is it time to have the conversation and when is it time to delay for a beat. There are reasons why you might give it a moment and not go straight into the conversation. But can I use a phrase from AI? Let's be honest. I don't know if you've seen a lot of these posts. When AI writes your post, it always says, well, let's be honest. Let's get real for a minute. It's trying to be human. Isn't it cute? So, let's be honest. Now I can't remember what I was going to say. I just distracted myself with AI. Can you imagine? Anyway, it'll come back to me. So, we hope it will resolve on its own, but it typically doesn't. In fact, your silence is acceptance. Your silence is acceptance. And so I would suggest that we train people how to treat us. What we allow, what we accept is what we condone, right? And so if there is a standard of behaviour, if there is an expectation, if there is an agreement amongst you, the minute you let it slide, you're making a very clear statement. you're making a very clear statement. You might have heard that saying, I can't hear your words, your actions are so loud. I can't hear your words because your actions are speaking so loud. So we condone what we ignore, and we have to be thinking about, is it okay if I let this slide just this once? What am I saying to the rest of the team? What am I saying to the client? What precedent am I starting here right now? Cool, these are big questions for like, what are we, almost, it's not even 10 o'clock, folks. All right. Number 2 reason we avoid these conversations is we don't feel we have permission. This is particularly relevant when it comes to behaviours in the workplace. This is what I've noticed. It's easier to have conversations when it's about expectations. You're the boss, we need to get this out by this date or deliver in this way. And so it's easier to have performance conversations based on agreed and explicit expectations. Would you agree? It's easy to go, hey, it was supposed to be due on the 7th. It's now the 8th. Let's chat about it, yeah? When it's behaviour, it's a little bit more tricky. The way you spoke to that client in the meeting, the way you're always late when you're handing in stuff to me, right? These things get a little bit more personal and they ratchet up in terms of the stakes and the consequences and our propensity to avoid them. I have a client called Margaret. And Margaret came to our coaching conversation and she was really, really stressed. She said, we've just signed up this huge deal. The company's really ecstatic, like it's a really big win for us. High profile, high visibility, highly profitable project or client. But it's absolutely killing me, Anneli. It's killing me. I am the only support person to this client and they are just calling me day and night. They're expecting stuff at the drop of a hat. I don't know if they realise I've got other clients I'm also servicing and taking care of. They're making changes last minute. They're wanting extra stuff last minute. I'm working days, nights, weekends. I'm tearing my hair out and I'm thinking about leaving. 46%, friends, right? 46%. So my first question to her was, what conversation have you had about this with the client? How many conversations do you think she's had about this to the client? None, because she's not their boss, right? They are her client. The power dynamic has changed. She doesn't want to have this very difficult conversation to say, stop giving me so much work, I'm snowed under, I can't handle it. This is out of scope, is what she's saying to me. This is out of scope. And I said, who was part of the scoping discussion? And she thought about it. I said, who's giving you all these requests? And she thought about it. And it turns out that where all this was coming from was someone who wasn't even aware of the scoping agreement. And of course, they don't think they're asking for a little bit more and a little bit more. They just think they're asking for work, right? A very reasonable request. Meanwhile, she's sitting here going, it is totally unreasonable. And I don't know how to say no. And the drama for her was she didn't say no. And then she didn't say no, and she didn't say no. And she trained that client that was okay, and that was the new level of agreement in their scope of work. And it wasn't, and she was getting resentful. Can you see how this stuff just eats at you, right? And the biggest issue for her was that she felt she didn't have any permission because she wasn't their boss. And even worse, it was a client. A high visibility, high profile client. But the problem here is that our voice is what defines our values. If you don't hold that line in the sand, if you don't speak up and say, hey, here's the implication, here's the consequence, I actually can't deliver my value. I hear this all the time with people who say to me, I'm a people pleaser, I don't know how to say no. I go, how's your work going? I'm actually really swamped. I'm like, no, how's the quality of your work going? Actually, it's dropping. Yeah, why's that? Because I've got too much on because I've said yes to too much stuff. Yeah. What's your actual job? What are you actually delivering on? And are you compromising that because you're being too many things to too many people? So our voice defines our value. We must be able to say no, to give difficult feedback, to have the kind of conversations that enable us to show our value, to do the work we were hired to do. Number 3, we don't want to hurt others. Who had that on their table? Some form of, yep, okay, good. Again, just validation that you're part of the human race, you're good beings, very good. Here's an interesting tidbit. It turns out that the same part of your brain that lights up when you're physically hit, like pain lights up in a certain part of your brain. When you are verbally hit, when you are emotionally shocked, when you feel excluded or ostracized or you've been given bad feedback, you're in some sort of emotional pain, that same part of your brain lights up as if you've just experienced physical pain. Is there any reason, is there any wonder why we have sayings like, it was a kick in the guts? Like his words, they just felt like a slap in the face. It was a knife to my back. Like, why do we say these things? It's because your brain can't discern the difference between what's a physical feeling of pain and a social, emotional feeling of pain. This is why we know, as John said, words are worlds. We create feelings of safety or terror in people with the words that we use. And so we know that we don't want to hurt people. We assume that our feedback or our conversations are going to create some level of pain. That said, do I have any gym junkies in the room? Does anyone go to gym? Yes, okay, thank you very much. I would have liked to have seen an arm go up like this. Yes, okay, so some of you go to the gym, some of you have done sort of some physical activity in your life, but if you've had a really good workout, my gym junkie friend, tell me, do we want, you might not be, you might have gone once, who am I to know? I don't know. If you go to the gym and you're sore the next day, is that a good thing? Yes, that's right. Okay, so you know if you go to the gym and you're sore the next day, you go, yes, no pain, no gain, right? We want our muscles to break because it's in the rebuilding that they grow stronger. Same thing happens to humans in our emotional and social world. We need to grow at the boundary of support and challenge. We can't just have cheerleaders all the time. In our table conversation in this morning, we agreed that it feels good to have the cheerleader, but if that's all you have, there's a piece of you going, I know I'm missing out on growth, right? I know I'm not getting better, I'm not being challenged, I'm not being stretched. So, is it good pain or bad pain is what I want you to think about. We don't want to hurt others. Hello, my name is Anneli. I would like to declare that I am a Brené Brown fangirl. Yes, if you don't know who she is, you should Google her. She has one of the highest watched TED Talks ever. She talks about vulnerability. She's a social researcher and author, all-round amazing human being. I listened to her on a podcast once, and she was talking about doing some social research on parenting. So they were going across the country and they were getting focus groups of kids and asking them about their experiences as kids, as younger kids, with their parents. And she said, we saw a pattern emerge. Kids would get together and they'd say, well, my parents were so strict that we weren't allowed to watch TV until we'd done our homework. Like, oh, if you think that's strict, my parents were so strict, we weren't allowed to watch TV at all. And some kid would say, well, my parents were so strict that we didn't even have That's right, we didn't even have a TV. And so there ended up being this kind of like one-upmanship. Everyone was they were bragging about how strict their parents were. And then in every one of these groups, there would be one or two children who would be quiet. And they'd take them aside at the end of the conversation and they would just ask them, so we noticed that you didn't say much in that conversation. We're just curious, what was your upbringing like? And every child would say some version of something like this. Well, my parents, they were the ones who would buy us alcohol for me and my friends. They were the ones where we could be out all night and it didn't really matter where we were. We didn't have curfews. I could play Xbox all day, all night if I wanted to. It didn't really matter. I guess they just didn't care. I guess they just didn't care. Even as children, we realise that in order to be better, in order to live to our full potential, we need boundaries, we need strength, we need challenge. We need people to hold us to account. We need people to be clear with us and give us feedback to make us better. We learn as kids that boundaries equal care. So what's really going on here? We've talked about why we're avoiding them. We've talked about why we need to have them, why our values are defined by our voice, why it sets expectations, why the show of challenge and boundaries are holding us to a higher standard of what we're able to do. But here's what I think is really going on. We're not just avoiding the actual act of the difficult conversation. From almost 20 years of doing this work, I have come to believe that what we're actually avoiding is the uncomfortable emotions. It's the uncomfortable emotions of having that conversation. What we're doing is prioritizing comfort over conflict. We tell ourselves, I don't want to hurt this person. We tell ourselves, maybe it'll just go away. We tell ourselves we don't want the negative consequence that might occur. So we are prioritizing the comfort. And the biggest lie we tell ourselves is that we're prioritizing their comfort. But whose comfort are we actually prioritizing? Our own. This is one of my favourite quotes. If you avoid conflict to keep the peace, you start a war inside yourself. That carpet doesn't magically turn into a magic carpet and float off. It becomes lumpier and lumpier, and it sits as a weight inside your heart. You know you need to be having these conversations. So, to that end, let's talk about some top tips. This is where we're going to explore the wisdom in the room, and then I'm going to leave you with a couple of my own from my experience of doing this work. So here's your next table conversation. What are your top tips for having a difficult conversation? Now, with John, we talked about mapping the territory, right? So this is looking at them from what happens before, what happens after, how do we get support from the system and the policies in the organisation. Let's get a little bit more micro on this now, right? So I want you to drop into the actual act of having the conversation. What are your top tips for how to have that conversation? All right, away you go. All right, welcome back everyone. Hello, hello, welcome back. Testing the other mic as we go. A quick table run. Okay, so we're talking about what are your top tips for having these conversations. So there is a lot of wisdom in the room. There is a lot of experience in the room. We're going to do this super quickly so you get as many top tips as possible. So when I point the microphone to you, who's it going to be? I want you to rehearse just one top tip. So everyone think for yourself right now. Just prepare in case Anneli points that thing in my way, my direction. What's the one top tip I want to share with the rest of the room? It's going to be short, it's going to be sharp, it's going to be succinct, super powerful. Where are we going to land? Have you got it? Have you got it in your mind? All right, here we go. Oh, coming from behind. How mean is that? In a critical conversation, never surprise people. That's the lesson here. Quick, short, sharp. What's your top tip?
Top tip is to make it a safe space and say, can you just give me a moment to finish what I need to say, and then we can discuss it afterwards.
Brilliant. Thank you. Safety. Never approach from behind without warning. That's the opposite. Excellent. Very good. Okay, you sir, my friend. Top tip.
To discuss facts and not emotions.
Nice. Okay, be clear on the facts. Clear is kind, my friend. Clear is kind. Oh, I should start so I'm looking at everyone so I'm not sneaking up on people. Over here. One top tip.
Be prepared.
Be prepared. Nice and succinct.
Have structure so there's no ambiguity to the outcome.
All right, so we want structure, less ambiguity. The more you're going to free flow, the more you're probably going to go off track, right? Yes, and you're already going to be heightened, possibly in an anxious state. Your brain is going to be hijacked by negative emotion, which means I forget what it is I wanted to say. And as soon as I see the look of terror in their eyes, reflecting my own, my brain has gone out of the building. So, structure, preparation, your top tip.
If you're feeling really nervous, rehearse with somebody else.
Brilliant, yes. The value of doing it out loud with somebody else is you get to look at their face. So when you speak over me in the meeting and dominate the conversation and make me feel like a small tiny ant, and their face goes, huh? You know you've probably gone too far. And maybe you've used some inflammatory language and you haven't even realized how hot that topic is for you yet, right? So practice out loud, talk it to somebody else, reduce the emotional stakes that you've got invested in this, and just make sure you're not making the situation worse. Yes.
I'll steal Denise's one. Have a monologue, have a dialogue, not a monologue. Thanks.
Perfect, yes. Dialogue, not a monologue. So in a moment, I'm going to share with you an opening structure for how to structure a critical conversation. But it's just the opening, because you cannot structure the whole conversation, right? As much as we want to do the script and go, this is your bit. This is the bit where you say, oh, that's a good idea, Anneli. Thanks for the feedback. Yeah, sometimes people don't read the scripts and they don't know their part, and they will bring all their humanness and messiness into the conversation. So we want to be prepared. We want to maybe script the opening, get clear on the first few paragraphs, because would you agree that if we are clear on setting the expectation for the conversation, then we can ensure that we've set ourselves up for the rest of the conversation. That's really what we're going for here. So here are some top tips that probably came out of your conversation. Assume a positive intent. We already heard it this morning from John. Number one tip, assume a positive intent. Number two, we've got be comfortable with silence. People need time to process. They are hearing something that might be unexpected, might be unwanted. They might not be comfortable in the conversation. That's okay. Sit with them in the discomfort, remember? We're avoiding the discomfort of those emotions, so allow them to have that time. Ooh, oopsie, oopsie, don't use too many pillows. So there has been talk about a certain sandwich. You all might have heard of the certain sandwich. Bad news sandwich, otherwise known as a shit sandwich. It has all different names. But the idea with that sandwich approach to feedback is good, stretch, good, right? The danger with the sandwich is that in our tendency to want to be nice, we have massive buns, a tiny bit of nutrition in the middle. And what happens is your brain links to primacy and recency. First thing we heard, last thing we heard. We skip the bit in the middle. So if you go, hi, how are you? How's the kids? How's the family? Great day. How about the Saints? They won. Woohoo, amazing. By the way, you're not operating at your maximum, and I really need you to be different when it comes to the workforce. But anyway, how are you going on Friday? What are you doing on the weekend? Blah, 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 blah. We have to make sure that we're not burying the feedback in too many pillows. It's okay to let people hear the truth and sit with it. And finally, choose your environment, choose the timing, choose the place. There is a time and a place to have a difficult conversation. I would suggest it might not be in this room, for example. It might not be on a Friday night before someone's going to go away for the weekend. So be very careful about public shaming and blaming and people's levels of embarrassment. All right, so I want to leave you with some resources that you can use as a deep dive for this conversation. So you can take a picture of this. I'll also have it on the final slide if you miss it. These resources, there are videos, there are articles, there is a critical conversation starter based off Susan Scott's work in her book, Fierce Conversation. It's literally just 5 questions that you can use to get yourself into the conversation. That's what you would script. That's what you could rehearse. to give you the confidence to kick off the conversation in the way you want it. So I'm going to show it to you, but just know it's in the downloads, right? So you don't have to worry about it. It's in there along with a fully scripted example, if that's what you would like. So it has 5 components. The main idea, which is really like, what is it that you want to say? How were you personally impacted by this event? What is it? Do you know what? Oh man, I'm getting so old. I can't, holy moly, I'm going to have to wear my glasses on stage. I can't even read that little writing. All right, why is this important? What part have you played? And what do you want them to do at this point, which is really important. Because we talked about it's not a monologue, right? It's a dialogue. So what is your invitation to get into this conversation? So this might look something like, let me riff. Okay. Hey, Sarah, I would like to speak to you about the client meeting we just had on Friday. I noticed that when the client was speaking, you were looking quite disengaged. You were playing with your phone and you were looking outside the window. And it appeared that you were disengaged when the client was speaking. I'm worried about this because I'm worried that that reflects poorly on our brand with the client. You know how tight the market is right now, and our personal and professional brand is everything. We can't afford to lose this client. I didn't say anything to you immediately after that meeting, but I wanted to say, I didn't want to leave it. I wondered if maybe it might have just been something in the moment, but I think this is too important to ignore, so I'm raising it now. What are your thoughts? Right, so that's wasn't perfect, but it was off the cuff. You can make it tighter and shorter. The idea is, you don't get a 20-minute monologue, friends, all right? This is not a 20-minute monologue where you sit the person in front of you and say, okay, here's my laundry list of things. It's just a short paragraph to start the conversation, and then it goes wherever it needs to go. All right, so here are 3 ideas that I want to leave you with that I think makes a real difference to helping us get more motivated to have the conversation. Would you agree? You can Google how to do it. There's AI out there now. There is no lack of information about skills and how to do these things. But it's the motivation that really stops us, right? It's the avoidance piece. So 3 key things I want you to think about. Number 1, clarify your why. Why are you having this conversation? Why is this important to you? And I would suggest that as a leader in your organisation, as a professional in your organisation, it is part of your role to have workplace conversations that make better results. Wouldn't you agree? It is your job to talk about the difficult stuff in the flow of work. That's just what we do as professionals. Number 2, cultivate curiosity. Before you go in with, and you did and you shouldn't have, and this is what happened, ask yourself some questions. What else might be true here? What else could have been going on here? What is going on for this person at home? What am I making this mean? Get really curious about what this is about so that you can go in with an open mind and an open heart. You will create less defensiveness if you go in with curiosity. You might have heard that saying that, you know, it's nice to sometimes, before you criticise someone, you want to walk a mile in their shoes, and I think it's really good advice. But most people leave off the most important part, and that is when you do criticise them, you'll have their shoes and you'll be a mile away. Yeah, most underrated quote. Okay, number 3, converse normally. Now, what I mean by this is, when we tell ourselves this is a difficult conversation, it's going to be a really hard conversation, it's going to be a critical conversation, we build it up in our minds, right? We build it up to be bigger than Ben-Hur, and we think it's going to be this really big thing. Chances are it's just a thing. It's just a conversation in the flow of work. So when I ask clients who coach with me, they will say something like, I've got to have this conversation, I've got to tell this person this, it's really awkward, and blah, 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 blah. And I say, okay, it does sound like it could be difficult. So just tell me exactly what it is you want to say to them. And they will say something like, I need to tell Christopher that we need the information a week before he normally sends it because we're just not getting enough time in the preparation to get it off to the client. And I go, yeah. Well, doesn't that just sound like a regular conversation? A conversation in the flow of work, my friends. So start thinking about some of these conversations as just a regular conversation. It's just what we do in the workplace. So clarify your why, cultivate curiosity, and converse normally. This will help you. My question is, do you care enough at the end of the day to be having these conversations? Do you care enough? So on the third day, Jess gives me a phone call. And she says, you know, Anneli, I had that conversation with my colleague about speaking over me in the meeting with our clients. And you know it didn't go really well. And it's been really hard for me for a couple of days now. And I really wanted to take it all back. But I'm really glad that I didn't. She told me, that she was going to have the conversation. I said, just give it an extra day. And so in that extra day, the gentleman had time to go home once he had calmed down. He came back to her the next day and said, Jess, I just want to apologise to you. I want to apologise for speaking over you in a meeting, and I want to apologise for my response when you gave me the feedback. I was really angry. I was really mad at you. And I've been stewing on it for a few days. I don't know if you've noticed. I've been stewing on it for a few days. And finally, I had a conversation with my wife, and I told her the things you said to me. Do you know what she said? Oh, yeah, you do that to me. You do that to me, darling. You do that to us all the time. So I want to say thank you because nobody has cared enough to give me this feedback. And now I'm wondering, where else am I doing this? Who else is talking about me in these ways and not telling me? So I just wanted to say thank you. Do you care enough to create the discomfort for somebody else to grow? So I want to leave you in the words of Susan Scott, the author of Fierce Conversations. No single conversation is guaranteed to change the trajectory of a life, a marriage, a career, but any single conversation can. Thank you.